In 1952, we turn our technology to a different purpose. We detonate a new and more powerful nuclear weapon, the H-bomb. Russia follows with their own the next year, 1953. The H-bomb is a fusion bomb, not a fission bomb, and it creates the needs for missiles to deliver them. This is led in America, interestingly enough, by immigrants from Germany, of whom had worked on the Nazis' V-1 and V-2 rocket programs. But they were brilliant scientists, so we were all too happy to bring them in. The Air Force will develop rockets that go hundreds of miles, but the dream is to develop one that can go to the other side of the Earth, an intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM. The Atlas and Titans are the first ICBMs, but the liquid fuel they use is too unstable. It won't be until we develop a solid rocket fuel in 1958 and add miniature guidance systems to make sure they go where they're supposed to go that ICBMs become realistic. The Minuteman missile, one of our first successful ICBMs, becomes the basis of the U.S. arsenal. And then we soon developed the Polaris, which is fired from submarines, developed in 1960, fired from underwater, which is kind of cool when you don't think about the nuclear destruction it's delivering. America was developing rockets for the purpose of blowing up stuff on the other side of the world. The Soviets had come up with a different idea with what to do with rockets. And in 1957, America learns that the Soviets had launched a man-made object, Sputnik, into space. It's a satellite that orbits the Earth. The U.S. hadn't even really thought of going to space. But once we realized we had been beaten to space, which is a little funny because we weren't trying to go there, but of course competition with the Soviet Union really dominated everything, the federal government begins to dump enormous amounts of money into not only the space program, but into science in schools. This goes back to the idea of kind of Marvel Comics. If you think about Reed Richards, that's what he's doing, right? He's trying to get up into space first. We launch Explorer 1 in 1958, our own man-made satellite. And then we vow that we will beat the Soviets into manned space. Well, this involves sending up test subjects. And so the Soviets beat us into the first living creature into space, Laika the dog, and we follow with our own monkey that we send up into space. And there you see them. These are the first two living creatures to go into space. Soviets, of course, also beat us into sending a man into space. They send up Yuri Gagarin, who's going to go up on April 12th of 1961, becoming the first American to go into space. America has responded to the space race by creating NASA, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration. And NASA has begun to develop rockets and, of course, recruit astronauts. And the first American to go into space will be Alan Shepard, who goes up a little bit less than a month later in 1961.
Lift off and the clock is started. Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear.
Gagarin had orbited the Earth, but when we send up John Glenn about a year later on February 2nd of 1962, and he makes multiple orbits around the Earth, we make a big deal out of this. We say, we're the first one to make multiple orbits. But in reality, we were just kind of desperate for a win, with all due respect to John Glenn. The Mercury program, which was this first individual space flights that went up, will give way to the Gemini program, which are two people going up at the same time. After losing to the Russians in every significant space accomplishment, John F. Kennedy will announce that America will be the first country to put a man on the moon. And to this end, we create the Apollo program. It has its setbacks. On January 1967, 3 astronauts are killed in a ground fire. But of course, it has its great triumphs. And on July 20th of 1969, Neil Armstrong becomes the first human being to walk on the moon. And the whole world watches this on TV live while it's happening. And it's really one of these unifying moments, where were you when, that everybody who was around at the time and had access to a television remembers. I always like to make the point when we look at this picture. There's a reason we have a big American flag up there. This is, in many ways, a message to the Soviets. You beat us into space. You beat us with the first animal into space, first man into space. But we beat you to the moon. Ha ha, we win. And I think it's if you want to understand the time, it's important to think that when you see this picture. We'll go to the moon 6 more times in the next 3 years, but we haven't been since. In 1982, we'll begin our shuttle program. The idea is to create a system where we can take short, easy flights into space. The idea that going to space would become a regular thing. That never really develops the way we thought it would. And, of course, the shuttle system, the shuttle project has its own problems. The Challenger disaster, when January of 1986, one of our shuttles blows up and kills 7, and a similar disaster in 2003 with the Space Shuttle Columbia. By 2010, in an attempt to cut government spending, to cut back on the budget, we end our space program altogether, which once had been one of the most remarkable accomplishments and most talked about and awe-inspiring things mankind had ever done, is simply now no longer a part of America, of modern America anyway.